Welcome to the Look Good, Move Well podcast.
This is the banter today is Satya trying to figure out what's in my bowl over here that I'm eating, getting in my last bites. Your smell is off?
I'm getting over a cold, so
you have COVID?
No COVID.
That was a smell reference to COVID.
I know, but no, just the normal impairment from having a cold. Throwing off your scent game? Smell game, yeah.
Yeah. Have you been doing any meal prep lately for yourself, or you still kind of flying day to day?
I tend not to prep too much, just maybe 1 or 2 meals in advance, but I've been trying to be a little bit more intentional about the family dinner situation. Yeah. Because when I sit down to eat with my kids, we all eat different things. So then it's like a creative challenge to come up with meals that will satisfy all of our needs.
Are there any crowd pleasers that like everyone's into, or have you not found?
I make a really bomb mac and cheese that was my mom's recipe. It's like you make a roux and it's got a whole situation, a whole cheese sauce situation.
Yeah.
And my kids will devour that. So if I'm like, make some macaroni and cheese, make some protein for me, like that's a go-to.
Right on. I have never made my own mac and cheese before.
Oh my God.
And to be quite honest, I don't think I've consumed even like a crappy processed mac and cheese. Like it wasn't something I like was really into as a kid. Like I didn't, not that like there was any, I mean, I love all the things. It just wasn't the thing we were making a lot of. We were making like pasta with a red sauce was like much more typical. We did do the baked shells stuff with like ricotta and that whole deal, but that was as cheesy as it got
the
around. Pasta got for us. I think. Yeah. All right. Is that sufficient on the banter?
I think so.
Okay, great.
We have a good topic today.
Well, then introduce it if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, I don't mind at all. I forget how this originally came up in our conversation, but we were planning some weekly content as we do on Mondays. And we got to talking about nutrition plans where you can have all of the variables super dialed in as if you're in a scientific laboratory versus something a little bit more complex in the reality of day-to-day life. And so you were saying how when a bodybuilder coach sits down to make a plan for their client, it's super straightforward because all of the reps progress in certain ways, or all of the lifts progress in certain ways, and all of the nutrition progresses in certain ways. And they know that that client is going to be so dialed in and just do the same thing over and over and over, and they're going to get amazing results versus what most of us deal with in our day-to-day lives.
Totally. Yeah.
Is that a good estimation of what we talked about?
Yeah. The only thing I would change is the context by which we brought it up was actually talking about a nutrition coaching deliverable or service that we're actually building currently. And we were just sort of looking at, okay, what are the challenges that we are going to face as at functional bodybuilding in building a really great nutrition coaching service, on top of what we already do in our personal coaching. But what are the challenges when you're outside of the context of the laboratory, really?
Yeah.
And I very affectionately said that bodybuilding and bodybuilding coaching is like laboratory experiments on humans. And it's, I mean, that's true to a certain degree, but only for a subset of clients, bodybuilders, coaches. You know, what I mean by that is when you have a hyper compliant client, you have a very, thoughtful and well-experienced coach, and you can control as many variables as possible in somebody's life, training, lifestyle, nutrition, then changing body composition becomes much like, a lab experiment where if you follow the protocol and you replicate the process and you don't let confounding variables show up, you have a lot of data feedback all the time to sort of make adjustments and make sure that you're getting to the result that you want, or you can kind of manipulate the experiment to get to the right result. Now, somebody who's like deep in the bodybuilding world will probably challenge that, and they'll say, "Hey, Marcus, it's way more complicated than that. It's this and that, and on show day and on peak day, you know, on there's so many variables that you just don't know." And that may be very true. And I'm not really talking about like the final 36 hours before you step on stage, like how you dry yourself out completely and how you know, maybe get the muscles to like engorge with extra carbohydrates. And what I do mean is that you can look on, you know, social media and you can see people preparing for bodybuilding shows. And it's rare, I don't see it very much, that people show up to the bodybuilding show like over fat. You know, like those people might self-select and not, you know, enter the contest. But like when somebody signs up, they have willpower, they have discipline, they have a very driven goal, they have a good plan, they basically, you know, follow all the rules. They lose body fat and they lose a lot of it and they get really lean. And it's like, okay, well that's just when everything goes right, like we know how to do it. But in the real world, quotes real world, like what is real world, for most individuals who are not, they don't have a stage, you know, date where they're going to go and be mostly naked in front of judges and people to maybe hold them more accountable. They don't have the same regimented plan, right? Because if that's the goal, is to get on stage, then I'll do whatever it takes to get to the best shape possible, even if that means the same, you know, 4 to 5 workouts that I do every single week for 6 months with just ever so slight changes in the variables of weight, etc., reps. If it's the same meals that I eat Monday through Sunday, like all 7 days of the week, it's breakfast is always the same, you know, lunch is always the same, midday snack is always the same, post-workout meal is always the same, dinner is always the same. And the only thing that changes in the nutrition front is over the months, my calories get less and less. My carbs reduce, my fats reduce to the point where I'm very depleted. I feel low energy, but I'm losing body fat, and that's the goal. And then the amount of movement that I'm doing, well, it's always the same workout, but I might start with no cardio and then build my cardio up month after month. So it's 30 minutes a day, and then it's 40 minutes a day, and finally I reach that sweet spot of 60 minutes of cardio a day, plus my lifting, plus my diet, and I'm getting as shredded as I possibly can. This is, I'm just trying to illustrate with words what that process looks like. And so what can we learn from that? And what can we sort of acknowledge is like, that's not going to work for somebody who comes to us and says, "Hey, I want to lean out. I want to lose some body fat." Maybe they say, "I want to lose weight." And then we help them understand that, well, actually we want to lose body fat. We want to build muscle. We want to, you know, we might not lose weight, but we want to change your body composition. That's the goal. That's what gets you healthy, strong, and looking the way you want to. How are we going to take that person who is not interested in doing the very structured design, you know, all the variables controlled, quote unquote, bodybuilding plan?
Yeah. So I was just thinking of a friend of mine who prepped for a bodybuilding show. And the one thing I remember about the process was that she only ate one thing, and it was tilapia and broccoli. Yeah. And it was like ridiculous. Like, show up for, you know, a business lunch, got your Tupperware of tilapia and broccoli. Sure. Like in your car, tilapia and broccoli. Yes. And, you know, her like on the stair climber and eating tilapia and broccoli is like the whole thing. And
it's the fish and a rice cake.
Fish and a rice
meme.
cake.
If y'all haven't seen that, go to YouTube. Look it up. Type in fish and a rice cake, and there's an Irish bodybuilder who is, he's hilarious.
Yeah. So I've got that on one side of the camp. And then we do talk in functional bodybuilding when it comes to nutrition about doing things that are repeatable, things that are consistent, things that are simple. And so what do those terms mean in the context of having enough variety where you're not going to show up to your business lunch with tilapia, but, still being able to control the variables to the degree to get results.
Yeah. Well, this, in a nutshell, people that do bodybuilding prep or bodybuilding, approaches to body composition have a very clear structure, and they're consistent as hell with it. And so we have to, that's what I'm always pulling. I'm pulling lessons from that world. Like, Marcus, where do you get your education and your inspiration for your nutrition? It's like, well, partly from the hyper consistent and disciplined, regimented bodybuilding world. Why do I pull information from that? Because they're really effective at getting you, the result of losing body fat. Like, if you want 100%, likelihood or 99% likelihood of reaching a fat loss goal, let me set it up for you. It's going to probably be boring. It's going to be, highly repetitive. It's going to probably feel pretty terrible, but it'll work. And when the stakes are high, people are like, that's fine. I'll do it. The stakes are high. Hey, I got a wedding in, 9 months. I want to look great for that. Stakes are really high. Okay, I'll follow that plan. I got to shoot we're shooting a movie, and I got to, Hugh Jackman's got the Wolverine shirtless looking like he just stepped off of, a bodybuilding stage. He's got that date. They're shooting that scene on October 13th. All the scenes for the previous 3 months is him in his leather jacket. But that scene, he's got to be ready for. So it's like, starting for 2 months, 3 months, how long he needs. That's what Hugh Jackman's going to do. He's not going to go do if it fits my macros and change every meal and have a little cheat day on the side.
Sneak in a donut.
No, and like, I'm going to go do CrossFit one day. I'm going to go do this one day. It's like, no, he's going to dial it in because, he's on a multi-million-dollar contract, and this movie and that particular thumbnail and that, that trailer with him doing that, looking like he's literally shredding his body with those claws. Like, that's what's going to sell tickets and make his money. So I take that information in much the same way that it's like, Marcus, you're going to build a functional bodybuilding program that's got lots of different training disciplines in it. Well, how do you learn about powerlifting? I go look at the best powerlifters in the world. I go look at the best Olympic lifters in the world. Go look at the best CrossFitters in the world. Like, what do they do? Okay, let's bring some of those thoughts together and recognize that when you bring those thoughts together, you're adding variables, and it's not going to be perfect. A functional bodybuilding program that uses a West Side barbell progression for the press, it's not going to get you, elite bench pressing numbers. Like, you got to go follow the West Side program to the T. That's what's going to get you the most elite bench pressing numbers. So we're going to take some of that, but then, so your question was, what does it mean to have like consistency, or repeatability? Well, it's like, what we learned from the bodybuilding example is that if you go super simple, meaning you have very few variables, it's easier to be consistent. If you have it in one respect, if you only have broccoli and tilapia as your food choices, then guess what? Like, there's not a lot of places to mess up. You just eat the same thing. Where, on the other hand, if you're like, hey, here's a recipe book, a cookbook. Here's Jamie Oliver's, 5-ingredient meal cookbook. There's 120 recipes in it. They're all simple recipes, but I want you to take this and then just go and, eat 4 of those or 3 of those a day. Okay, well, which ones do I pick? Oh, what am I feeling like today? Do I have the ingredients for it? Like, I got to go shop and I got to prepare it. And, well, this one, it says 5 ingredients, but man, the prep time is 30 minutes. And, you get decision fatigue. You get exhausted from when you do the same thing over and over again, you get really efficient at it. Your friend knew how to cook tilapia great by the end of this thing.
We all did.
We all did, right? But before that, you're like day one, you're like, what do I do? Do I thaw it out? Do I buy the frozen? Do I get the fresh? Like you were trying to make sense of things. But because it was just 2 ingredients, it's like, like you figure that out quickly. You can't figure out Jamie Oliver's 5-ingredient meal cookbook with no guardrails very quickly. It's going to take super long time. And by the time you might figure it out, you've probably already lost motivation because you're not seeing the results. You haven't been able to stick to it so consistently. And now there's so many variables that you just don't know what's working, what's not working. What's good about the cookbook 5-ingredient recipes? Well, there's variety, right? I mean, I'm sure after prep, your friend was like, if I never see a tilapia fish again in my life, that's fine. Because it's gross at that point. Yeah. Maybe now a few years have gone by and like tilapia is on a menu and maybe she's just scarred from it or he is scarred from it, but she wants to pick it up again. She will, but having some variety or some options can help with the sustainability of it. Like, I can do this for a long time. I'm not going to go out of my mind with just how boring this is getting. But so we see there's trade-offs. There's like, adds a little bit of variability and fun and variety, but it also adds more decisions to be made, maybe more complexity to the preparation. Hey, takes a lot of time to prep these meals and longer than steaming some broccoli and, pan frying some tilapia.
So I'm thinking about how someone said to me once that humans are really wired for complexity and our natural inclination is to try to add more and tweak things. And to a certain extent, I think that that's pretty true. What we see when people do functional bodybuilding programs is it's always like, well, how can I mix this in or get a little extra of this or like do a little of that on the side and do FBB? Do you think that there's ever a case where someone is too simple if they're sort of doing the same nutrition routine over and over, doing the same lifting routine over and over? On the other end of the extreme, is there ever a case where things can be too simple, or should we all be trying to take a look at our level of complexity and maybe take a few things off the plate?
Yeah, I mean, I think people are. I'm not here to challenge that statement, but I think people are hardwired to evolve and improve and make things more effective and efficient in their life. Like that was evolution. It was like survival of the fittest. Like, does this thing confer an advantage to me over the next person? Okay, it's a little bit more complex, but because I take the extra step to go complex, I'm like 10 times better than my neighbor. I'm going to win. I'm going to be able to hunt down more prey, whatever. But certainly within nutrition, going super simple has a very clear benefit in maybe one small area, but it has downsides. Like, you cannot eat tilapia and broccoli forever. You will develop some nutritional deficiency. Tilapia is a very lean fish. And so at some point you will be like, you won't have really a lot of your essential fatty acids. You won't be getting enough fat from, like, she got lean to a certain extent. Eventually she get really lean on that kind of diet. Now her body fat percentage is super low. She doesn't have her own body fat stores to use for not just energy, but for like essential human functions, like to manufacture hormones and things like that. So she's not getting, tilapia and broccoli doesn't get you any fat. Okay, that complexity or that simplicity meant that you developed a nutritional deficiency, and a nutritional deficiency then, you stop functioning well, you can't train, your hormones shut down, you lose energy, and then next thing you know, like, everything is a downward spiral. Now you're basically, now you're starving, you're in starvation, you start wasting, and all kinds of bad things can happen. Now, that's not really that likely for most people. I don't see, the average person getting so simple with their diet that they run into nutritional deficiencies like quickly. And this is even true for just preface this by saying we're not going to go into a argument or debate about plant-based diets, but when people go into a vegan diet, that's simplifying your diet in one manner. It's cutting out a whole group of foods. And for people who have been eating meat and maybe a suboptimal meat diet or animal-based diet or diet that includes animal products, they cut out all animal foods, they simplify, and now they start to feel dramatically better. They cut out everything that had animal products in, which was 90% of the processed foods that they ate. And then they were like, I got to eat more plants. So they start reaching for more whole foods. And now they're like, they just suddenly increase the quality of their diet tenfold. And they're feeling better as a result. Now, fast forward 6 months or a year, that person who went plant-based is now starting to feel low energy, or maybe they don't perceive it, but they're lower energy. And then maybe after 18 months, they're like, man, I just don't feel like myself. And then they go and they put back some meat and they're like, whoa, I feel amazing. I feel like Superman. Like my energy levels are through the roof. So in that case, yeah, the person went too simple, but that's a different way of saying it. They went too simple. It's like, they cut out a certain group, which simplified things, which was of a benefit for a certain period of time. And then maybe that time span ran its course. So is there a way to be simple without putting yourself into nutritional deficiency? Yes. I don't think most people, unless they're very, hyper disciplined, or they have, I don't know, there's something, they just different how they process the thought of food and simplicity. Like most people are not going to run into the problem of like going too simple for too long, unless they're following some type of trending diet or a diet like culture where they're like, I don't eat anything with grains in it or anything with nuts and anything with this. Like, so they just cut out, 4 food groups. But those people need to be just mindful. They need to either be really aware of the nutritional deficiencies that might show up if they go this route, or like they need to take breaks from it periodically and just reintroduce those foods. So long-winded answer. Can you go too simple? You certainly can. But I think most people benefit in the early stages from going simple. Mm-hmm. And that's probably what we'll take from that bodybuilding approach, where it's like, hey, how can we simplify things for somebody who really wants to prioritize fat loss or weight loss? Well, what about the functional bodybuilding training method? What about the person's activity level each day? And what about their diet? Can we encourage them to simplify, or can we choose the more simple route? And a simple, a basic example of that would be, Pillars as a training track has more day-to-day, week-to-week, cycle-to-cycle consistency in terms of what the inputs of training look like compared to Perform. Mm-hmm. Perform has more variables, has, Monday in training cycle 1 of Pillars and Monday of training cycle 2 of Pillars, going to be generally the same amount of work, the same amount of, the same intensity, the same stress response. You can kind of put a number to that and be like, well, Susie's going to spend this much energy doing Pillars. Whereas with Perform, that could be variable. Monday, because we use different formats in Perform, because we might rotate different lifts a little bit more, we might change the structure of training. You might have a Tuesday that's a little lower energy expenditure one cycle, but then the next cycle, it's a little higher energy expenditure. So, the total amount of training energy output might shift a bit more than Pillars. So if we had somebody who's like, hey, I really want to dial this in, what should I do for my training? Well, I would coach you to do, the pillars or the pump style training where there's a lot more consistency versus perform where there's a little less consistency. I can't be as controlled with the variables there. Pump and pillars would be more like a traditional bodybuilding program in the way that you could, as a coach, kind of measure the outputs a bit more closely so that we can build a very consistent structure to their nutrition movement plan to reach the goal of fat loss or muscle gain or whatever the goal might be for the client.
Yeah. I was just thinking about how people were talking about pillars in the functional bodybuilding Facebook group, and someone was like, oh, isn't that the beginner track? And I think that there's a temptation to think of simplicity as basic or beginner, but there's a whole other level to it.
There is. Yeah. I mean, we're going to record this tomorrow, but it's like this YouTube episode about coming back to basics with movement. And it's like, doesn't matter how progressed or how advanced or how long you've been training, you better return to a simple barbell RDL from time to time and a simple goblet squat from time to time. It's like, yeah, I can back squat 400 pounds. Great. Let's go do sets of 20 in the goblet squat with control and just make sure we're refining our positions. Like, simple or basic does not mean it's for just beginners. It really is for everybody at any time that style of training suits what your goal is or what your needs are. I would return to a pillars style training as an advanced trainee anytime that life got complicated or had a lot of stress outside the gym and I didn't want to expend all my energy here. It would be a time or a week where I wanted to have maybe I was feeling a little beat up, or I knew I only had 60 minutes to train. Like, I'm going to use it for that. And I can still, if I have, let's say I'm not beat up, let's say I'm feeling great, but I only have 60 minutes, then that training style, I can push it as intensely as I want to. We did a pillars workout 2 weeks ago on a Friday, me, Satya, Shauna, Jaden, and we were all smoked, and it was to illustrate, a point for a YouTube episode that we did. But I mean, we're all training typically on a normal day, a little bit more volume than that. And yeah, it was outrageous how sore everybody was from the simple, quote unquote beginner program. And it's really not the beginner program. It's the kind of, we'll call it foundations program of functional bodybuilding, which is like, these are all the essentials that you need in functional bodybuilding, and written in a way that if you're brand new to the training, it's going to be the easiest to sort of digest what you're supposed to do, as opposed to, jumping in for your first FBB workout ever. You've never seen any of our notation, starting with perform. You might find yourself a little like asking the question of like, what does that mean? What does that mean? Just too many times that, for your first day, or for your first month, right?
Yeah. So how would someone determine if they need to control their variables a little bit more, simplify things more to have more repeatable, consistent success, like in bodybuilding, if they're that person who still loves variety and still loves the fun of functional bodybuilding and likes to eat different things? And what are some indicators that they might need to take it down a couple notches?
Well, I think we came into this talking specifically about really nutrition. It was like, and I think anybody who's not seeing the results that they want should do that. It's as simple as that. It's like, hey, like I'm following Jamie Oliver's cookbook diet, like we're doing this and that and this and that. And I'm kind of like trying new recipes and I have this, but I haven't seen any weight loss. It's like, okay, well, simplify it, right? Start way more simple than that. And simplification means remove variables, variation, I'll define it. Pick 20 foods that you are going to eat. And then you don't eat anything beyond that for like a month, 2 months, 3 months, pick, and that might even be too much. It's like pick 3 proteins or 2 proteins, three proteins that you're going to eat. I'm going to eat eggs, chicken breast, and ground beef. Okay, that's it. And then pick 3 fruits that you like. Great. Those are them. Done. Pick 2 vegetables that you're going to rotate. Great. Done. Pick 2 starches. Rice, potato. Perfect. Done. And then pick 2 fat sources. I'm going to have avocado and I'm going to have olive oil. Okay. Nothing else in your pantry, in your fridge, anywhere. And just put it on repeat. Eat the same thing over and over again. And that's more variety than tilapia and broccoli.
Yeah, I was just thinking that sounds pretty good.
Yeah,
I could do that.
I think I said 9 to 12 things there, and if you pick 3 or 4 at a time to make a meal with, you could probably get 30 different combinations out of that.
And be super efficient, and prep is easy.
Super efficient, prep is easy, and I promise that you will be. Here's I think the universal truth of this is that if you actually stick to it, people think, oh, that'll get boring. Yes, it will get boring at some point. That will get boring for everybody. I don't know. Maybe for a certain percentage of the population, it will never get boring. But it's going to get boring much later than you think it will. You think it's going to be boring after a week, but the research shows that we all eat the same 20 foods anyway. Like 80+% of the time. So just pick ones that are really aligned with your goals. And by saying like we eat the same 20 things, like some people eat chicken McNuggets is like one of their 20 things, right. And Starburst is one of their 20 things, and mocha frappuccino is one of their. So swap those things out with a couple other simple things, and get through the painful process of giving up all the processed stuff for something whole, which is just going to mean like your body's going to have a little detox phase where it's not going to feel awesome because you're going to be like, oh, I need, it's just like beyond the scope of this, but yeah, your bacteria in your gut that are bad are dying and they're saying, you feed me sugar. So yeah, if you're not seeing your results, simplify. And then you're like, oh yeah, I simplified. I'm still not seeing results. Simplify even more, right? Keep going until you're seeing results or you're at tilapia and broccoli. Because I promise, if you get down to tilapia and broccoli, there is no way, if you truly just eat those 2 things and you're moving, that you're not going to start to see fat loss or weight loss or whatever, one of the 2.
Yeah. Because
you cannot, I would challenge anybody to try and go overeat tilapia and broccoli. Like, you might do it for 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, but after that, you're going to settle into like, whoa, this is kind of a lot. Like, I can't eat 4,000 calories of tilapia and broccoli. Like, it feels better to be right around here. And then boom, like the shift starts to happen in your body. Yeah. So yeah, simplify as much as you need to start seeing results, and then introduce some complexity. And did that derail your results, your goals? Like, do you not have the body that you want anymore? Well, guess what? Like, that's the trade-off. You wanted more complexity, or you wanted to add some more variety in there. You wanted to have the freedom to just eat out 2-3 times a week. Awesome. What did that add to your life? It added this. Terrific. What did it take away? It took away 3 to 4 pounds of body fat that you put on over the course of a few months. Are you open to that as a trade-off? Like, does that feel good to you? It sure does. I love it. Then don't sweat it. Great. If you're like, that didn't feel good, then it's like, okay, well, you went maybe a little too far. Let's dial it back in over here. And this can be sort of the, bulk phase, cutting phase in like the normal world.
Right.
You have 3 months where you simplify, and then 3 months where you're like, I don't know, I'm ready to have dinner out with my, spouse two times a week or once a week. And great. And then after 3 months, that turns into twice a week. And then it turns into like one night of drinking. And then it turns into like, something else. And you're like, you know what? I got to get simple again. Yeah. I got to go back to that.
Yeah.
And you go through these little swings in how your body performs and looks, and that's all good. That's normal for people. So I don't think that's yo-yo dieting. To me, that's just like dialing in, like, what's the right level of me paying attention and being super aware of this stuff, as I go through this journey of loving food, being in a real world setting, being social, having a little bit less rules to follow. And then, periods of like, well, I really want a desired outcome, so I have to make it a bit more simple.
Awesome.
Was it?
Yeah, it was super simple.
Sweet. I'm glad. Well, that's yeah. And thanks for this topic. We've been on a run of doing topics and podcasts inspired by your questions and your feedback. And although this wasn't directly a question from an audience member, this is certainly something that we've heard in the feedback a lot, and a question that we're solving for right now. We're trying to solve for with an actual service product, nutrition product coming from functional bodybuilding in the coming months. So if you have questions on this, we'd love to hear them.
Yes.
You can DM us, and this is going to be something we're going to unpack more and more and more in the months to come. Thanks for bringing it to the podcast today, Satya.
Mm-hmm.
And any final thoughts before we go?
I got to go eat my lunch.
And get on your call in 3 minutes.
Get on my call.
Okay, thanks for listening, everybody. We will see you next time.
See you next time.